all. Welcome to another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. We have a special guest with us today, and we'll be introducing him shortly. But without further ado, let's kind of get into what's happened over the past couple weeks, because it's been a lot. Matt literally came in and landed 20 minutes before we started recording tonight. So I usually start with what I've done. Let's shake it up a little bit and just talk about your past couple weeks, Matt.
Oh, man. Well, this is kind of the later part of the season where some things start to switch gears. Not every species breeds directly in the spring. So we're getting into that later part of the year where a lot of the Vietnamese mandarins are starting to lock, if not starting to ovulate, which is a great sign.
Nice.
Also, I think, and I don't want to push my luck, but I think I have a couple of Mollendorfi that are about to drop. So that would be
sweet,
cool for this year, especially having moved. And usually it takes, on average, 2 to 3 years for animals to kind of settle into new areas, depending on how much of a change there was from environment to environment. So that's kind of a cool little switch up, and happy to see that, because I think when I moved 2 years ago, I think the problem was I moved during November.
Yeah.
And moving during that brumation time, I kind of shocked the animals and brought them out. So I'm glad to see that those animals are finally settling in. But it seems like every day I walk past the incubator, I'm pulling hatchlings out, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun, exciting, kind of scary when I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, that end you have staring down that barrel is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So far this season, a lot of the animals that have really hatched are kind of the North American species, some of the Texas rats, black rat snakes, corn snakes too as well. And we might actually touch on some corn snakes tonight too as well. But with that being said, I think there's already over 200 hatchlings already downstairs in the hatchling racks. So kind of exciting. Some really, I don't know how to put this, but there were definitely genetics in some animals I didn't know were. And
I saw that on your Instagram page.
Well, there's going to be a post by Clint here pretty soon on a black rat snake morph. Because hatched out some black rats, and I called Clint and I go, "This isn't right." And Clint goes, "No, we shouldn't have hatched out any of that stuff. That's really cool. Are you sure that you didn't put any other male in there?" I go, "Nope," and it's a first-time female.
Oh, so
definitely some interesting aspects, not only from a new morph in black rat snakes, but also a other black rat snake morph that is kind of, I don't want to say like a commonality, but when you think about black rats, it's something that sticks out. But I'll leave Clint Bartley to post that one, because that will be a cool little aspect of it. And other than that, just trying to stay afloat.
Yep, keep your head above water. Yeah.
You got that right.
Well, I've had a couple interesting weeks. I think we're 1 week behind schedule for posting. That's part of that's because I did something insane. I went on a vacation, and it actually, it was nice. But we went to the Outer Banks, and I spent a lot of time at the Outer Banks. My family's been going to the Outer Banks before it was trendy to go to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And when I was in high school, I ran around. I would go to Nag's Head, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, and then everybody goes to the beach, and I would turn around and walk west into those maritime forests and chase hognose snakes and corn snakes and red-belly water snakes. And the first venomous snake I ever caught was back in there, and it was an eastern cottonmouth. So the week we were there, the weather was insanely perfect for late June. It was at night; it was almost chilly. So. My wife was like, "This is the family vacation." And I was like, "Yes, it's the family vacation." And then I would wake up and think, "Oh my God, these conditions are so freaking perfect for herping. It's ridiculous." So somehow I had a secret weapon, which was my son. So I was like, "Yo, Colin, you want some father-dad time? And, of course, I wanted to have father-dad time. So Colin and I went herping a lot on the vacay, and he didn't catch a cottonmouth, but we absolutely had his first venomous snake in the wild experience, which was for a father who goes herping and does reptiles and amphibians. I kind of thought, like, this must have been what it was like when I shot my first buck with my dad, because I didn't really want to do it. I did it. I ate it. It was good, but my dad was like losing his crap, and I could definitely see on Colin's face, like, why are you so excited? So that was pretty cool. And then as far as, we're in the same boat at West Liberty. All of those eggs that we talked about are absolutely hatching. We have 2 corn snake projects going on, and I think we've had 2 clutches hatch and they're completely out. But I think last time I was talking with the students, we have like 4 or 5 pipping right now. And when those hatch, those kids they're measuring the head length, the head width, the snout vent length, the tail length, and they're weighing them. So, one snake takes about 10 minutes. And when 5 clutches go, it's a lot of good data. But we had those. My first Getulus complex that I intentionally bred have now hatched. So I had a clutch of Outer Banks king snakes. There's another tie to the Outer Bank. Everybody now knows why those things are so special to me, by the way, after that little diatribe. So I had a bunch of Madagascarophis colubrinus, Madagascar cat-eyed snakes. I have 2 females, and they both went, so those are all out. So I've got 20 of those now, which is pretty awesome. And just projects, more projects, and projects up at the university. And then next week's going to be fun. One of my graduate students, Erin Allison, her thesis is really cool. One of her chapters is on basically what story do we tell to get people to not kill rattlesnakes? And so traditionally, you were taught, if you're from our generation, Matt, that you teach this utilitarian story of snakes eat mice, mice give us diseases. We don't kill the rattlesnakes because they help us that way. And more recently, people have started to anthropomorphize the story and basically talk about the fact that rattlesnakes, when they have their young, there's evidence of parental care. The whole communal den site, the recent papers that have come out that show that snakes have friends. I don't think snakes have friends, but I think snakes have like acquaintances or individuals that they know. If I follow this one, I end up at the den and I don't die over winter, like that kind of thing. So Erin did this really cool thing with social media, and we put together a survey. We made videos, and we just basically tested which of those 2 stories, an anthropomorphic story or a utilitarian story, gets people to convert to at least not wanting to kill or wanting to at least walk away. And what's really cool is we've been working with someone at California Polytechnical University, Dr. Emily Taylor, and we're working with advocates for snake preservation on this thing. And Erin got asked to present her research at the Biology Pit Vipers Conference, which is next week. So, having your student being asked to go to a conference in the middle of the desert where there's more rattlesnake species than anywhere outside of Mexico, that was a really hard thing for me to say yes to. So we're going to be down there all next week, and I love the desert Southwest. I've been there one time, so we'll be herping our brains out and with a whole bunch of snake biologists, and it's going to be pretty badass. So we're all excited, but it's also the middle of field season, so I'm certain that I'll be down in Arizona, and my crayfish stuff back in Appalachia will be exploding, and I will probably be putting out fires that are happening in rivers while I'm standing in a desert. So we'll see how that goes down. But yeah, just living the dream. That's all I have to say about that. So that's really all I have. Anything else on your end, Matt? Nope.
No, that's about it. You want to plug your search for graduate students?
Oh, yeah. Let's do that now. So, come on, guys. I've had 2 bites in the hundreds of times I have plugged the grad student. It's not really hundreds. We only have like 14 episodes, so it's more like 14 to 20, but it feels like 100 times. But yeah, the grad student front, I mean, some of the projects I have lined up for herpetoculture are insane. I'm talking with somebody in Japan right now that works with Andrias japonicus, like the giant Japanese salamander. And I might have a field project that involves giant Japanese salamanders. So for like, if somebody would have offered that to me when I was fresh out of undergrad, I'd be, thrilled to death. So if you're a salamander person and you're looking for grad school, this isn't official yet. It's as close to official as it's official enough for me to talk about it on the podcast. And then our Costa Rica stuff, I was on the phone just yesterday with the woman we're working with for development of the field station that we'll be using. And we're talking about doing a really cool study investigating UVA and UVB radiation, where we'll take boa constrictors and have them in the field in enclosures where they will literally be in Costa Rica where they're native to. And so it's replicating captivity down there. And then we're hopefully going to be looking at blood chemistry to see, is there a change in vitamin D3 and carbohydrates and lipids and all that kind of good stuff. And then we'll be replicating that with boa constrictors back in West Virginia, which is about as far away from Costa Rica and their native habitat as you can get, and seeing, like, are we hitting the physiological attributes of these snakes in human care, which can go any number of ways. And we're scientists, so we don't really want it to go in any one way. We just want to know what way it's going, if that makes sense. So those are two projects that are so close to fruition that I can talk about them now, and I need graduate students to work on them. So there's that. And then next year is the year of the hognose for me. So there will absolutely be so much heterodon stuff going on in my life. It's ridiculous, because wrapping up the Dipsadded book now, and I got to get a lot of data quickly for hognose snakes. So the best way to do it is to make it someone's thesis. So I don't know exactly what that's going to entail, but there's absolutely going to be the potential for that. So if you're interested in any of these things, be like the two individuals that reached out to me, and please reach out. Because I'm looking to have enthusiastic, excited students that were just like me when I was in my mid to early 20s. So by all means, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook, please. Or if you want, email me. So yeah, thanks for reminding me on the plug, Matt. So there you go. All right. Are we ready to jump in?
I think so.
Okay.
I think we're good. So
do you want to introduce our guest this time?
You can. I mean, we kind of keep the same platform here.
All right, so we'll do it. So our guest tonight is Josh Burlinger. Josh has done quite a bit of work with Matt. In the focal species for tonight's episode, Josh shares a passion for file snakes, just like Matt. So we're going to be finally, talking about the files, and I know people want us to talk about file snakes, so this is going to be a fun one. And then, as you all know, if you listen to our podcast, we just let the conversation go where it's going to go. So there could be some Asian rat snake talk. There could be some talk about how herpetoculture has grown, given Josh is a relatively young guy in the hobby, and then he's been working and discussing with some older people in the hobby, and it's kind of, we have some cool little avenues to speak about on that front. So without, that's our introduction. So how you doing tonight, Josh?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Sweet. So we always kind of do the general, how'd you get into herps? Have you been in herps forever? Is this something that has just recently come about? Where does your interest in these wonderful animals that we love so much originate?
It's been forever. I think I was like 10, and my uncle owns a wholesale pet store where he just does fish and mainly now. But back in the day, I was never allowed to have a dog, so I decided to pick out it was a snow corn snake at the time. That was my first snake, and then it just kind of evolved from there.
Perfect.
I went to the White Plains Expo, and saw people were doing this and breeding and, selling snakes and making money off of it. And I'm like, you know what? It's like, I got to really look into this. And I kind of just, dove right in. And ever since then, I've been either, I've had something, whether there's breeding projects or just, pets.
So on that line of thought, so you started with the corns. Talk a little bit about what animals you've worked with and what you're, kind of up through the collection as it stands today.
I've pretty much worked with everything. I've had ball pythons. Right now, my collection is very diverse. I have a lot of stuff from Matt, whether, the old world, rat snakes. I have some king snakes, Trans Pecos rat snakes. I've got some boas. I got literally a little bit of everything. My main thing is I do crested geckos. That's like my main kind of large chunk of my collection. And then I actually have some false water cobras too. One I got from you, Zach.
Ah, nice. You have, yeah. So, so we have files from Matt and falsies from me. That totally explains why you're on our podcast. There it is. Yes, the bells are ringing now. All right. So
Josh, like, with that even being said, I mean, you've got the crested gecko focus, but what kind of pushed you or pursued you to, other than the initial snow corn, what kind of made you kind of go into some of the colubrids and looking at some of the different varieties of those?
After keeping hundreds of ball pythons and wanting snakes again, I said to myself, there's no way I'm getting ball pythons that are so picky with eating and feeding live all the time. I was like, I want to do this, but I want to do it where everything or majority of everything will eat frozen. And that's where my collection is at right now. Pretty much everything takes frozen. And it's, every week, whenever I feed, it's no issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the biggest thing.
No, I think that's a real kind of important part to even bring about.
Oh yeah, it's just so much easier.
Yeah, a lot of people go that route.
It's a lot easier, between having the mice and rats delivered every week, even just the dollar wise, frozen, it's so much, cheaper to buy, and to just keep, if you have leftover live mice and rats, you need to have somewhere for it. I normally keep everything out of my, where my reptiles are, so you don't have the sense. So just so it's a lot cleaner, and so the animals don't go crazy too.
There's nothing worse than the ammonia smell.
Oh yeah,
afterwards with keeping mice and rats.
And then there's something to be said. We've talked about it a couple times on the podcast about having the peace of mind. This is supposed to be fun. So there's nothing like getting home and then you have that $900 animal that isn't eating and you've stressed about it all damn day. And then you I can't tell you how many times I came running down here into the office where the snakes are. And I put the pinky out before I went to school. And the whole day, about once every 15 minutes, I'm thinking, did that thing eat? Did that thing eat? It needs to eat, like that whole thing. And then you come down, you see that mouse. I'm like, no. And now I have, that's why I went to the king snakes. And those things are so food oriented; they'll try to eat themselves. So, I want the. I'm listening. I hear what you're saying, John. So, yeah.
Even some of the I'm surprised. Some of the colder species are they pound food. It's like they're almost like a false water cobra, where they just are very food motivated. Like some of the mandarins I have just destroy whatever you put in front of them. And it's awesome. I love it.
Yes.
Well, that means you're keeping them right. Yeah. Because if they're not kept right, then they get to be finicky eaters, and then people are freaking out, worried, and usually it has to do with husbandry, unfortunately. So, but it's I guess that might actually be kind of a cool point to kind of jump into maybe the file snakes, because those things have just such a tremendous feeding appetite, and maybe we can talk about some of the mandarins too as well. Maybe the falsies, maybe anything.
Yeah.
So.
No, the file snakes.
So what got you initially?
No,
go ahead. Go ahead.
No. So the file snakes, like Matt was saying.
Well, with the file snakes, what got you?
So I liked
what?
I liked how they were. I thought, the feeling of them. Just like the first time I saw them, I was like, all right, like these are very unique. Like I didn't see anything like that. And going to shows and having the ball pythons, I was like, okay, like they were kind of a garbage snake at the time. And then, Matt breeding them, I was just like, all right, these are actually pretty cool. And once I got my hands on them, I fell in love with them. It was, I have both the capes and the cross eyes, and they're just awesome. They're literally like, they literally come out almost like a falsie trying to eat. It's insane. Especially the big girls that I just got. They're very food motivated. It's actually really awesome. And they know like the difference too.
Yeah, that's like one of the most.
No, you can get there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and taking them out.
It's definitely one of the more interesting parts of it.
Yeah, and taking them out too. It's like they almost know, like they make me a little bit nervous when they start turning around, and but they're pretty cool once you take them out. It's it's that first initial reaction when you get them out of the tub, and they realize you're not food. They're awesome. They're some of my favorite snakes that I have in the collection.
So going off of that, Josh, since I'm probably the only person that ever really talks about it, you want to go into how you're keeping both species of the files in terms of husbandry, style of keeping, and just kind of layer it out either by cross-eye or by capes?
I have them both pretty much the same way. They're both just on mulch, with I keep them all in tubs. I think I have that rack set at like 85 or something like that. And they're awesome. They're pretty basic and simple. It's not like there's anything difficult to them. I would say almost like keeping like a corn snake or something like that. It's not, I would say almost rocket science to keep them alive or, to keep them going.
Is that similar to the way that you're keeping them, Matt, or are you keeping them a little different, or might as well throw this out
same
there?
way. Within both of them, I've kept them both on cypress mulch, typically with a warm spot about 85, relative humidity like 60, 65, so just a little bit more moist than what your average room is. But other than that, Josh kind of nails it. He's raised some from hatchlings, and recently I cut back on some of my breeding products, and Josh ended up getting a trio of adult cross-eye too as well. And they're, I don't want to say food aggressive, but they know when you open up the tub and you got food in your hands ready to feed
Definitely.
them.
So I have a question as someone who has zero experience with file snakes. Are they fossorial? Like, are they underground? Like that body plan they have and the keeled scales, to me, knowing what I know about snakes, says this is a snake that's burrowing through the substrate. But at the same time, I don't know if they're actually doing that. So like with the mulch and the subs, when you pull the tub open, are they like up on it, or are they down in it, or a little bit of both? Because I know with Musaranas, Runa, a lot of people that keep them will have them on Repti chip and mulch because they'll go down in it and come up out of it. And I've always kind of, I don't know why, there's probably nothing to it, but I've kind of always in my head allied the false Musaranas to the files in Africa. So what's the deal on that front?
I haven't noticed them mainly when I pull out any tub, they're sitting right on top. Normally, it's almost like by the water bowl, kind of. The females right now, since I have a like a hide box or a lay box in there, they kind of always have been in there. But even the male, like he's normally right on top, either sitting kind of by the water bowl or just laid back. But they're normally, I don't think I've ever seen them, in the mulch at all. I don't know what your observation has been with them, Matt.
No, it's been very similar. I've changed keeping style a couple of times in terms of either offering a hide box, a wet box like a lay box, or just cork flats. But I've never actually noticed them burrowing within the substrate, and I've kept them on peat moss, cypress. I moved away from the peat moss just purely because they're such an aggressive feeder that they go after the food and they shake it around, and I always worried about all that peat moss getting in their gum lines. So that was part of the push or move towards the respective cypress. But
that's really
I think the
cool.
more interesting part is like the defensive feature, and I don't know if you've experienced this yet, Josh, but like if they are threatened, you can go into it then, because that is kind of an interesting aspect of it.
I think I mentioned this when I got the babies from you, and I tried taking them out of their deli cups once you sent them. I mean, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but for me, I've noticed that they kind of push like their body against each other and kind of like put whatever it is against their scales and kind of almost make it like a weird feeling for you. And I don't know if that's the defense feature that you're talking about, but that's what I noticed when I was pushing, taking the babies out.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of part of it is they really try to file at your hand almost. It's one species of snakes that's never offered to bite. I've never been bit by one. But the other defensive part about them that's kind of unique or interesting is their musk is solid black. And it smells like burnt rubber, and it's awful to get off your hands.
Huh.
I don't think I've ever had
That's
that
special.
yet, thankfully.
Just be happy on that one, because I once got it on my shirt, and I was like, is this tar?
Like,
Like, what is going on?
That sounds terrible.
Whoa. Is that both species?
Yeah.
Is it both of them?
Both of them will.
Cool.
But it is both. But very unique because typically you don't see that musk is black or anything of that nature. I mean, Mollendorfi musk is like jet red when we were talking about them before, but like the solid black, and the smell on these.
Okay.
But I've only had it happen once, and I was like, holy cow, what happened?
Oh, it sounds terrible.
Man.
Well, I don't think you're going to have that issue, especially working with the captive-born animals, too, as well. That happened when I was pulling out a wild-caught animal out of a bag, fresh wild-caught, and that animal, it was a large female, and she wanted nothing to do with anything that day. So,
Jeez. So, what's the frequency of feeding?
Like snakes.
Yeah,
I'll do. I'll do like once a week. Feedings. It depends. Like right now, the females. I'm trying to get them to breed. So, I'm doing bigger meals once a week. I don't know if you found that to be best with breeding, Matt. But normally, for the corn snakes or other colubrids, I'll do smaller meals, like every 3 days to try to keep them going. But they have no problems, feeding. I'll feed those adult females almost like a small to medium rat, and they take it down no problem. The male's a little bit picky when it comes to food, but he still is not bad. He'll take down probably like a weaned rat or something like that.
Now, I think it might be important to make this connection here too. We're talking about rats, not mice, right?
Yes, rats. Yeah, they're getting rats.
Because most of the animals that you see offered, they're not large. So I think just in terms of like feeding, this kind of represents the adult size of some of these animals and what their kind of feeding response in nature is.
Oh yeah, no, the adults will take down small rats, no problem. It's awesome.
And in terms of like the breeding cycle and stuff like that, Josh, I mean, no, you're doing the right thing. Typically, what will end up happening here in probably like the next month or so is once this like heat wave kind of comes up, the male will probably go off feed altogether, and that will actually be the best time to throw that male in with the females.
Okay.
And typically, you'll want to feed the females a day before introducing them. And that male will typically lock up almost instantaneously.
Okay, yeah, that's what I do. I'll feed all the girls or I'll feed everybody, and then I'll throw the male in with the girls just to be safe, because with them being very food motivated, I don't want to have any issues.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of, the aspect of this species is, with cross-eye especially, the relative feeding behavior, I think they're just opportunistic feeders, whereby they'll eat pretty much anything. And I think that's typically kind of one of the things when people start to talk about snake eating snakes. And whereas the capes, whenever I have bred them, I typically have had to offer them snakes to get started as babies.
Yeah, when you sent me the capes, you sent me corn snakes.
But that could also be the fact that I did send you corn snakes.
Yeah, and I'm like, I thought you were joking, because like they pounded food no problem, and I'm just like, okay, like, was this like a joke or was it like just in case? And then I realized you're serious about it. I'm like, all right, okay. Like, but they've no issues with them since I've had them.
Yeah. And Josh, you want to jump in and talk maybe about the capes and kind of feeding behavior? I mean, because they're only, what now, a year and a half or so, I think?
I think just over a year I've had them for now. But yeah, that they have...
Okay. And maybe talk about kind of like their growth response.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty much similar to the cross eyes as far as food goes. Very food driven. Like you said, probably just opportunistic feeders. And then they'll grow. I mean, the female is, I'm starting to notice she's getting bigger than the male. And that's just how it goes. I don't know, the capes, I'm assuming, are the same way as the cross eyes. But I don't go crazy feeding them. I'm not like looking to, power feed or anything like that. It's just, every week just staying on top of them and just feeding them. And they're growing at a good rate. It's not like the fall season or anything like that, where they just blow up all of a sudden. But they're definitely, they definitely put on size fast.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's kind of interesting, just over time watching the files actually grow, and based on their feeding behavior too, because those things just, I mean, they're like a king snake from Africa. So
yeah. So do they turn around and like bite their tail and try to eat it? Like, because that's what mine are doing. My king snakes are doing right.
I have noticed them like just missing completely, but like when I first got them, they were a little bit more, like you said, I guess relaxed with feeding. Not, I'd have to leave the prey in overnight and then they take it that way. Now it's just I can't even drop it in fast enough for them sometimes. So it's definitely cool. And also, too, I feel like they're almost changing, not changing colors, but like the lightness to them is coming out a lot more as they're growing. Like that pinkish hue, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I have noticed that with some of the capes, especially. So the original group of capes that I acquired, Philippe Devogio had actually given me adult females that were actually wild-caught animals. And I had some captive-born males from Germany, and those two the two pairs that I had kind of created, the lineage that's now being offered within the hobby. And I haven't released a number of them either. I mean, Josh, you're one of two people that have them at this point. But with that even being said, watching some of the animals that I've held back, I mean, I'm amazed at the color and the brightness of some of the captive-born animals that have really kind of been brought out. Because I have no idea how old the wild-caught capes that I have are. Because Tanzania has been closed off from export for I think over 10 years, so those original wild caught animals are probably over 10 years, maybe 15 years old.
Holy!
Because Philippe had said they were adults when they were imported. So who knows? But it is kind of cool to at least get some of that lineage really going, because I think that's an important part for the hobby even going forward, is really kind of securing these species in both the private as well as the public sector, because as you and I had talked about before, and I introduced you to a friend of mine, Mark, and Mark had some conversations with you that I think maybe you want to talk about or share with the collective audience, because I think it is interesting when we talk about the hobby itself and connecting with other keepers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. When I spoke to Mark, me and him were talking about a bunch of stuff, but he basically said that, certain species that you're specifically working with, Matt, are kind of just, it's almost conservation work at this point. You're not seeing them so much in the wild. If he basically said, God forbid, if anything happened to the collection, your collection or whatever, those animals would kind of be lost. So it made me kind of open my eyes to certain things I was working with. And, instead of the more common things, I wanted more of a challenge with the species as I was working with. So that's why I got the Japanese forest snakes from you, and then just some other stuff, like even just the mandarins and the Vietnamese stuff. That's the main thing. There's a lot of more common animals in the hobby that everybody seems to be working with, but those rare niche type animals are very few, and that's why I think it's important to really keep that stuff going.
No, and it is kind of an interesting aspect, because we've seen in the hobby, and Zach can commend on this too. I mean, you see waves, right, where sometimes animals are heavily imported for whatever reason, and then they disappear, or people lose interest in them, and then that animal is lost to the hobby forever. Even with some of the Porphyracea. Like Volanti, for instance. What's interesting is years ago, those animals were readily available overseas in Germany, Europe, and now I'm having people contact me from overseas asking about those animals because they can't find them. Which is very interesting, and I think it's kind of within the hobby itself. I think sometimes we look at, what's trending in one area versus the other, and never really take it into a part of like a global hobby, because there's so many different nature characteristics of it that, if certain people aren't specializing in certain species or working with certain things or diversifying their collections for what they enjoy, you may never see that animal again in the hobby.
Yep. And on that line of thought,
it's kind of sad to think that way.
I've heard lots of people talk on podcasts and things where, like, if you're a ball python breeder, or a carpet python breeder, or a king snake breeder, or corn snake breeder, that it might be cool if you have like your bread and butter, and then you have just some animal that's not overly common that you put some time into and maintain, so that we can have it here in the hobby or herpetoculture or whatever you want to call it. On that same line of thought, I think it's important too that people never take anything for granted. I remember just in my little miniature resurgence back into, herpetoculture since I got the position at the university and had to start teaching the class and all that jazz. I've seen things at local shows and on King Snake and Fauna and Morph Market that one year they're everywhere and then you don't see them ever again. And it's just kind of interesting how those waves come. And then the other thing, which I can say, being that I am literally a card-carrying conservation biologist, it is nice for people to get a line of something or a captive population, because let's be real, if we can choose between a captive bred example of something and a wild caught example of something, I know I'm choosing the captive bred 100% of the time. And it does kind of relieve some pressure. I don't think it relieves all the pressure, but I definitely think it relieves some of the pressure on those animals out in the wild. And with all the legislation that's going on right now, I know, I think New Jersey, the state you're in, Josh, because West Virginia copied their regs. Like, you can't keep a normal looking corn snake, but you can keep a snow corn snake. So, like, it's a nice way to kind of compromise with some of the regulations. We're not going to go any further down this rabbit hole because this could be a 3.5 hour conversation. But at the same time, having those captive populations, it's always going to be a good thing for our discipline.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. No, you're right, Zach. The here in Jersey, it's basically anything with albino in it, or what they consider has red eyes per se. And yeah, I don't get that law at all. But like you said, that could be a 3-hour rant.
Mm-hmm. Well, the law behind it is basically to relieve. They don't want you collecting animals from the wild, and I'm not saying, here I am going down that rabbit hole. I said we're not going to go down, but it is true that on one given night on a road, you'll probably wipe out far more corn snakes getting hit by our cars than collectors. But you get that's just, at some point we do need to own the fact that there are unscrupulous collectors out there that figure out a species, and the next thing you know, they've got bags full of them, and they are causing a localized, decline. We can debate the impact of that decline on another day, but I do think there is, at least New Jersey's willing to compromise and say you can still have corn snakes. Because when the Herp regs came out in West Virginia initially, 2 years ago, it was literally no corn snakes. And I was like, you've just literally removed the ball python of Colubrid land. Like, they're at the Petco up the road right now for sale. And conversations with DNR biologists led to the compromise of, okay, you can have the morphs. So it sucks if you're a locality person, but if you want corn snakes, there's now a mechanism to have the corn snakes, and herpetoculture provided that mechanism through captive breeding and all that kind of jazz. So I don't know.
Oh, no, yeah. I understand that aspect of it.
Yeah, now you got Zach all fired up.
No, I'm fine.
Sorry.
I'm fine. So, anyway, it's okay.
Hey, so Josh, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about mandarins, because right now is kind of the hatchling season for mandarins, Chinese variety, and you start to see people writing messages of my mandarin's not eating, or is this the proper setup for my mandarin rat snake, or, you know, how do you keep mandarins, blah, 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 going down that road. In your experience, you have the Vietnamese mandarins. How are the Vietnamese mandarins to keep?
They're very easy. I only had an issue with one with feeding that I kind of squared away, but they're a breeze. The main thing is, like, I keep them cold. I think the hot spot's at like 75. And like I said, I've never had an issue with them. They're as far as mandarins go, I think they blow the Chinese out of the water with the size and everything like that.
Yeah, and how are you keeping your mandarins, I guess, other than the 75 degrees temperature? Are you keeping them in racks, cages, substrate?
I have them pretty much set up like you do. I have them all in racks. I have the big one, I have a bigger female. She's like in a 70-30, ball python style adult racks. And then the babies I just have, in regular, shoebox type tubs. They're on cypress mulch. I have a hide for them, cork bark hide, and that's really it. Spray down every once in a while, or when I see the water bowl getting low, I'll pour that into the mulch, and like I said, they're fairly simple.
And feeding-wise, similar aspect, feeding once a week, every couple of days? What's kind of your style or technique?
I feed everything normally just once a week, just to make it easier for me, especially with having, I have a very big gecko, collection. That's where my main, like I said before, the main focus is at. So I spent a lot of time feeding all of those, all the geckos. So it's normally once a week on the weekends. This way when I feed, I normally just take all the defrosted mice and rats and I just lay them out. So I've noticed that it kind of helps trigger a food response a little bit better. Instead of putting them in water and defrosting them that way, I'll lay them out for a couple hours. And I've noticed that, certain snakes that have been a little bit pickier will have no problems taking it, taking whatever food it is.
That's interesting because no one has ever talked about this on the podcast relative to feeding behavior with tricky snakes relative to the defrost style of rodents. So,
well, I've noticed the Trans-Pecos rats that I have, some of them they only wanted almost live. And I'm like, okay, well, let me try something. And I would, after I put them in, defrost them in water, I would take them out and put them under a heat lamp for a little bit. And normally then they would grab it. So then I'm like, you know what, let me just switch up gears completely, because I have, I think, a decent amount of Trans-Pecos. I have probably maybe half a dozen or so. So I'm like, you know what, let me just take all the food that I'm feeding and just defrost it, just leave it out and see what happens. And I've noticed that they definitely go for them a lot better. Much stronger food response.
Right on.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll have to have you come back on and talk about Trans-Pecos, because that's a species that really has disappeared from the hobby in terms of animals availability, different morphs do as well. So that's a very interesting species to keep. So one thing, Josh, you and I were talking about before Zach kind of jumped in on and we started recording, was the breeding season in terms of, colubrids and generalities. And I think it's something to talk about. We don't need to touch on it with file snakes or, mandarins, but obviously you do keep other colubrids. What is your technique or style to prepping animals for brumation, going through your cycling of colubrids?
I have a rack that I keep in my garage, and I kind of just throw whatever I'm cycling into that rack, and put them down for the winter, and then bring them back up, and put them back in their actual racks. It just kind of makes a little bit things easier for me. But this year's been very tricky, I've noticed, with breeding for some reason. I've been getting a lot of slugs, and I don't know if it's just because it's the first time that, I had one clutch so far, which was the female slugged out, and it was a first-time female corn. And then I have some Arizona Mountain Kings that are going, and I think they're going to slug out too. But I kind of got them right before breeding season and brumation, so I'm wondering if that played a part in it. But yeah, I'm really not too sure because I put a lot of stuff down later than I probably should have. But it was still winter time, but I just don't know if that played a part in it, with everything. So I'm just hoping for the best.
What is the winter like in your part of New Jersey? That's kind of are you in northern Jersey, southern Jersey? Like, does it get cold?
I'm in North Jersey.
What's the deal with winter? Because okay.
Yeah, so I'm in North Jersey. Sometimes it could get cold. This winter, I've noticed it's been a little bit more mild. So I don't know, if those temps played a part in it. I would assume so. But yeah, sometimes it could get freezing cold. It's, not fun.
Not fun. Okay. Gotcha. So did you, when it gets super cold and you have your animals in the garage, do you do any kind of intervention, or is it like a garage connected to your house?
What
do you do in that scenario?
The garage is connected to my house. So normally I'll have like a space heater in there just to be safe. But I think I'm trying to remember what temps it got to, but I think I try to keep it at 45, 50-ish. And yeah, it really stayed pretty constant. Every now and then on a warmer day, it would jump up, and that was kind of out of my control, just because it was, like I said, it was a very mild winter, I feel like. So some of the days, it was probably close to, 50 or 60, and that's what the garage got to, unfortunately. But yeah, I tried to, monitor everything as best possible. Like I said, I did have a space heater in there just to be safe, because you never know, especially for those cold nights. But yeah, normally stayed around between 45-ish. Didn't really drop anything below that.
Intriguing. Okay.
Yeah, I always, it's interesting because you're like Zach, running and putting stuff in the coldest part of the garage. But I always wonder, and are we maybe bringing males out too soon for pairing? Are the males getting too warm? And respectively off of that, do you introduce your males at certain points in the season? Do you keep your males at the same levels in racks? What's kind of your approach that way?
I normally try to keep the males on the lower levels of racks. Right now I'm very challenged with how my setup is, but normally I like the males on the bottom of the racks just because it stays a little bit cooler. I kind of brought everybody in and out of brumation almost the same time frame. It wasn't like, all right, the males are getting, 2 weeks extra or whatever. It was just, I did everything in, one whole group. And when I introduce, it's really, it depends on the male. And normally I wait till they shed out and see how their food response is. And then start pairing, as soon as I kind of can. And then once I feel like the female's, starting to develop follicles, I'll normally check to see. I start really cycling that male in.
Yeah, one of the things that happened with me this year is I'm realizing how many times I got duped by ovulation swells thinking that they were evidence that the snakes were gravid. And so I was literally pulling the boys at the absolute worst time. And I know that this coming season, next year, I've decided they're staying with, I've heard Matt say this before, the boys are staying with the girls all the way through like pre-lay sheds. I'm not messing around trying to like deduce what I'm seeing because I learned my lesson a little bit this year. Have you run into any kind of issues on those fronts or no?
No, normally I'll pair until I know like the female's definitely gravid. It's normally like once I feel like she stops eating, and you could see the ovulation and the eggs inside almost. That's kind of when I'll stop pairing. Just because you want to be sure. If it's an extra week of pairing, it's not going to make or break the male. I feel like unless I'm running the male to a ton of females where it's really stressing them out.
Cool.
Yeah, and Josh and I were talking about this relative to some of the North American species. I don't know what it is this year, but double clutching, I think I might have missed marks this year because I've noticed either I've missed marks or the males have gotten too warm because some of the double clutches of animals that normally would have just went regular, I've actually seen more slugs this year from. And I'm not 100% sure. I still contribute, Josh, your experience here too. I think some of it has to do with the weather that we've seen the last couple of seasons with the up, down, because that does play a role with these animals. And I think I say this just out of pure experience, but I remember cleaning animals, and I had leucistic Texas rats, and I was running out of space, and typically when I clean racks, I'll leave empty tubs in there, and I'm like, well, I'll just throw these two together, female laid, she's not in her, ready to lay a second clutch or anything like that, and go in to put the animals back, and they're locked. So obviously they had copulated, and I'm like, well, this is great. Did the same thing with mandarins, pulling them out. Oh, great, awesome. But I wonder sometimes with some of that, either the weather is triggering a different response based upon the cycle. Because I've had corn snakes even lay 3 clutches a year.
Holy.
And, I think in captivity, we take some of this stuff for granted of how even with proper means of double clutching animals, because typically if an animal's going to cycle a second time, you might as well have a male in there. But I think I may have missed something, or maybe my males had gotten too warm and the sperm count decreased, but I'm not in there like Chad Fooch going up and scooping up goo and looking under a microscope. I'll just let it be. I'm good. So, but it's food for thought. I think it's something relative of this conversation, because a lot of people don't like to talk about it. Josh, and I commend you for bringing that up, because I think it brings up a different topic that a lot of people never really think about.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the weird part was this, like, when sorry, Zach. When I was still at my parents' house, I had everything in my basement, their basement, and the main room where I kept most of my snakes was to the. We had a big saltwater fish tank, and it was kept in a wall. So the back end of the fish tank was kind of in like the boiler room. And I had basically a rack set up in there, and the first time I really tried breeding corn snakes was in that room. Didn't cycle them, didn't do anything, and I had eggs. And it was the weirdest thing because I didn't think they would go. And I'm just like, you know what? Let me try it for the hell of it. And I, like you said, I think maybe the barometric pressure is really the key thing for a lot of these species and determines what's going to happen with their breeding cycles.
Yeah, 100%. And like the double clutching, that is something I would mind talking a little bit about, if we don't mind, because that's in certain circles when you start talking about double clutching, it's like it's the end of the world that you're putting the females through this again. And if the female's not ready for it, by all means, no. And there's definitely like a young female or sure, don't double clutch. But I've gotten into it before with people with false water cobras. Like, they literally are designed to pump out as many babies as possible because where they live, the predators are so numerous that if they don't put out 60 young a year, there's not going to be false water cobras because they have to get by that predation pressure. So I think it's kind of for some species, sure. I'm not saying double clutch everything, but I think if they're going to double clutch, if that's a possibility, by all means, it should be a fertile clutch because slugs are oftentimes what leads to dystocia or egg binding, whereas fertile eggs are what the things evolve to pass. So I do think it's kind of an interesting thing that sometimes that's a negative. Other species, it's not a negative. But that's just my 2 cents on that. Any thoughts, Matt, Josh, on the whole concept of double clutching as a breeder?
I'll let Josh go.
Yeah.
I think Matt and yourself, Zach, hit the nail on the head with it. If the snake's going to go, why not do it? If it's not going to put harm to the animal and she's going to lay slugs anyway, might as well try to get fertile eggs out of her and make it worthy of double clutching.
Yeah, no, I agree. And part of that even goes into the fact of, these are animals in captivity. These
Yes.
aren't animals in the wild. Where that animal in the wild, I mean, if you've ever picked up a wild-caught corn snake, they're thin, they're not real girthy, they don't have the fat reserves. More than likely, they probably aren't double clutching throughout the year. They're probably laying one clutch because their fat storage is just enough to sustain, that one ovulation. But with working with animals in captivity, I think we alter the biological path for these animals and can promote, double clutching, triple clutching of animals that may not be normal under certain, characteristics or environmental cues.
Mm-hmm. And this is where doing your nerdy deep dives and reading the papers and reading books and really kind of getting to know the biology of the animal that you're working with is really, it can only help you because with the false waters, again, I got back into it. I was on team, like, don't ever double clutch. It's bad. And at first I thought, okay, biologically that makes sense because anytime a female anything is producing eggs, fetuses, whatever it is, that is physiologically and biologically insanely intensive. But after breeding my false water cobras the first couple times and seeing, like, I bred them 2 years, I didn't put males back in. 2 years in a row, I got a perfect initial clutch and then a secondary clutch. And when I almost lost my absolute favorite female because of a potential egg binding issue, because she had a slug in there that was like crazy. It was almost the size of a racquetball. It was insane. But she was able to pass it. I realized, okay, there might be something to this. So I dove into the literature, and sure enough, in nature, based off the life history studies that have been done on hydrodynasties absolutely is direct evidence that those animals are laying 2 clutches. They have the potential to lay 2 clutches a year. And then I read more and found out Runa does it. The Lyophis, now Erythrolamprus, the yellow belly water snakes or Paraguayan water snakes, yeah, they do it. And then everybody's favorite multi-clutcher, tricolor hognose snakes, which Matt's currently dealing with, them dropping eggs like snowflakes. That's what they do. Like, that's literally their biology. So should you be doing that with a first-year breeder female that's small and everything? Probably not. Like, there's totally an argument there, but I think it's up to the keeper knowing, their animals. Should you push for, 4 clutches? Absolutely not. No. 3 clutches might be pushing it. 2 clutches, sure. But I don't think it's – I think there's some biology there to back it, and Matt nailed it right on the head. These are not wild snakes. I promise you that the corn snakes out in the wild right now, they do not have paramyscus mice that walk up to their face and sacrifice themselves every Thursday. Like, that's not happening. They're not getting these massive doses of protein every single week. And a really good way for them to utilize that excess fat and the excess, whatever you want to call it, is by depositing that through vitellogenesis into their eggs. So that's something that I was thinking about. I was thinking about this while driving home from vacation. So this is a good little outlet for that musing. But yeah. Now, before people start flaming the Colubrid and Colubroid radio Facebook page, we're not necessarily saying double clutch the hell out of everything. We're just simply saying that it is. Let's look at the science and the biology here, because a wild snake and a captive snake, not the same thing.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Because even looking at these tricolors now, I think I have 60 plus eggs right now in the incubator. Of the tricolors that have hatched, which is, I want to say, over a dozen, all of them have taken washed pinkies, which Zach, when I just had to rub it in his face.
You did. You just twisted the knife.
But that was even after we've had other people on talking about tricolor hogs, saying how hard they are to get going, everything like that. These are animals that I think this is multiple generations. I don't remember the lineage from Bill Hughes, where he got these females from. But I do think there is something to say, too, as well, about feeding responsive captive animals. Because certain animals, the best feeders are the ones that I would always want. And typically, as Josh commended, I mean, his animals took pinks, and I sent him corn snakes, and now he's got a corn snake project.
There you go. Yeah, that's the secret. Anybody wants a corn snake project, hit Matt up for some file snakes. You get both. Anyway.
Off of that, Josh, over the years, everyone likes to talk about tricks of the trade. Do you talked about the rodents, the defrosting them. Do you have any tricks or tips for maybe getting hatchling snakes going, since this is kind of the season of which everyone's going to kind of be mind-boggled and trying to get animals going?
I mean, I haven't had too much experience hatching stuff out yet. I would say just patience. Patience is the key. If it doesn't eat right away, don't stress. It's not going to starve itself to death. If it does, the chances are it probably was unhealthy to begin with. And there's always ways, little tricks around it. You could always do, mouse tails, assist feed, and kind of go from there to get them started. Like I said, just being patient and trying different methods. I like the washing of the pinkies. That normally helps. I feel like, Like you said, it kind of gets the urine off of them and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like it does help trigger a little bit of a better food response for the hatchlings. I know it helped for certain animals that I brought in, originally from you. But yeah, like I said, I think patience is the biggest thing with some of these babies. If it doesn't eat within the first week, don't stress out. It's going to eat sooner or later.
Yeah. And that's baby colubrids are the one aspect of colubrid keeping that I could do without. I don't have any patience, so it's very, very odd that this is the group that I decided to settle on. But you are correct. Things will inevitably go. I had of all things, a freaking Outer Banks king snake male that I picked him up in the fall. He's an adult. The other two, I think, ate the day after they got here. He didn't eat. He didn't eat going into brumation. Brumated him. Thought, okay, that's going to kick him into gear. Not going to eat. Or sorry, he didn't eat coming out of brumation. I thought the thing was going to start, like, literally kill himself. And then just last week, talk about a switch getting flipped. He ate, then he came out and tried to chew on the bottom of the enclosure I have him on. So I don't know what happened, but he's now ready to eat. And I had written him off to be a dead snake about a month ago. So just kept him around, and sure enough, now he's eating. And that's an adult. So with these little guys, holy mother. Yeah, I just messaged Matt mid-podcast. I think we may need to do one of our special episodes on feeding baby snakes. That might be a good one. That might help a lot of people. I'm going to be interviewing you, by the way, because you have far more patience than I. So that's how that's going to go down. Anyway, no, good advice, Josh. Definitely.
Oh, man. So, this is kind of an interesting one, Josh, and we've kind of asked a couple of the more recent ones. So, over the years, you've seen the hobby kind of really take different directions with different species. How do you see the hobby changing going forward in the future? Whether it might be keeping style, animals of interest. The hard part might be herp regulations, which I don't want to get too caught up on because that's a difficult one for everyone in the United States at this point, and I do feel bad for everyone in Florida, especially with some of the different transparencies that are occurring now for those keepers. But I think it's something, it's interesting to see and hear from other people's perspectives, especially yourself. I mean, because from my standpoint, from all our conversations over the years, I mean, you're getting into colubrids, but you're getting into the shiznit of colubrids, man. You're getting like top shelf stuff, man. So, I mean, it's not like you're just going in, like you said, like breeding corn snakes behind the fish tank in the boiler room. Like, no, you're getting snakes that really interest you and really kind of push you.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is all, like you said, kind of depends on legislation and what kind of happens with that aspect of, our keeping. But I feel like a lot of people are going to go towards what they necessarily like now and kind of try to keep the more rare stuff that intrigues them and do more of like a bigger setup instead of just cram stuff into whatever they could fit it in. I feel like, that's where this hobby's kind of going, more of like the zoo enclosures for, just your house, and kind of make it a nice display instead of saying, okay, I could fit 100 snakes, let's just say, in this area. Instead of doing that, let me get 20 and keep them, as best as I can in the enclosure that really is best for them. And I feel like that's definitely where it's going.
I agree with that. It's been nice to see that happen over the past 5 years. I would say that's definitely a direction things are heading in, which is pretty pretty cool.
Or you get a comment like the Texas rat snake post that I made of the female laying eggs in her water bowl, and they go, "These are deplorable living conditions." And I go, "Have you ever seen where Texas rat snakes live?"
Yeah.
Like, those are pretty deplorable situations.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, I agree entirely. I think the hobby is definitely making a switch towards the uncommon species. I would even say challenging keepers to their keeping levels and skills. I think we're also seeing a revolution where people are more interested to, or at least those keepers that are genuinely interested, pursuing books like Zach's book that's going to be coming out here soon. It's just Kevin Messenger working on the Asian rat snake book with him. I mean, it's a novel idea of bringing something versus a just simple care guide. A lot of people are more interested in the natural history, where the animals are coming from. But in the past, some literature didn't have all that connection. You'd have to go and look at different biological approaches, or maybe different disciplines to really pull everything together, where now you're seeing some of these disciplines brought together into those publications to really showcase a better idea too as well.
It's almost like herpetoculture is maturing. Like we had the initial getting to know you phase with the animals, and then we had to figure out how to breed these things, and then whether on the welfare side of things, I think about this all the time with the classes that I teach and the position that I'm in, the whole rack versus cage debate. That's just the topic that if you really want to like set people off, you just go one way or the other, because those camps are entrenched. But on the one hand, if we don't have the rack keepers producing the animals, we don't have the animals. Like there's an argument there where you have to like understand that it's at some point it's totally necessary, and racks are not necessarily evil for all things. There are absolutely animals that a rack setup is amazing. Great example. We have it's not a colubrid, it's a water python. And it's the New Guinea line or phenotype or locale or whatever you want to call it, which are notoriously, they're not snuggle snakes. They want to rip your face off. They are like the most freaking aggressive things on earth. And at school, I of course, way back when, given the opportunity to build a collection, I was like, well, we're going to have Australasian pythons. This is before I'd seen the colubrid light. So I got olives and I got these water pythons. And the male is okay. The female, we had her in a 4x2x2 animal plastics enclosure, PVC enclosure with hides and sticks and cork bark and like the whole kit and caboodle. And that animal, for the first 2 years of its life, just struck the glass and it was hyper defensive. It wasn't aggressive. It was just extremely defensive. And it inevitably got to the point where students didn't want to work with it. The keeping staff didn't want to work with it. And I was told, we will take this to your off-site facility, also known as my garage, and keep it there. So I have the water python female now, and the others are still up at school. And she was in a PVC enclosure. I moved her right into one down here, and same deal, man. She was not loving life. And I'm only in that room maybe half an hour a day. So, like, the amount of humanity that she's interacting with, much, much less. And even in that half an hour, bam, 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 so I had an extra tub, and I put her in a tub with Aspen in a water bowl, and I thought, this is just going to, be a temporary thing. And immediately, feeding response was better. The defensiveness dropped massively. It's been very interesting. So I kept her in there and thought, okay, she needs to move back to the PVC enclosure now that she's settled, because that's better, more enriched. Put her back in. Within 48 hours, smashing her head against the glass again. So there's So she went back to her tub, and that's where she's going to stay because I'm reading the snake. I'm not listening to human opinions, and the snake's telling me the rack's the best place. But at the same time, would never keep a false water cobra in a rack as a subadult or an adult. And they're in these great big 8 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosures in my garage. So it's. I think that the thing that's nice is that you're starting to see people. They've looked at both sides of the debate. They're learning about the biology of the animal. They're making their own decisions, but they're educated decisions. Now, is everybody doing that? No, but way more people are doing it than they were in the past, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, it depends on the species and what you're working with. Like I have some falsies that need to start moving up, and they need the cage. They need that enclosure and they need that room to roam because they're just, they sit out front and just kind of wait for food. And they, like I said, they want to go. And you got to give them what they need. Like you said, read the snake, and no matter what the opinion is of the next keeper, it depends on the animal.
Yep. Be a student of the serpent,
100%.
as Burke says all the time.
So Josh, let me ask this question: what is the next addition for your collection? It's kind of a loaded question, considering you've got a diverse collection already. But if you could have any species within your collection, what would that be?
I honestly have no idea because I'm working with a lot of species that I thought would be my bucket list animals. I really have no idea. Like I have the mandarins, like the exanthic stuff. I love that. I'm working with blue beauties, all different type of beauty snakes. I have musaranas. I have pretty much very diverse collection. So I really don't know where it's kind of headed. I think maybe some like tree boas or like the Sanzinian tree boa, like something like that, or Dominican mountain reds, something like that. I like working with everything and anything. So anything that would be a challenge, I feel like I would be into.
No, that's a solid answer. I got asked that recently, and I said, honestly, I just want to focus on the projects I have currently and really kind of just develop and grow those and really kind of diversify what I have. Because the hard part is when you have all your bucket list animals, it's hard to add. I think Zach would agree to that too.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I'm quite happy with where I'm at. I have the only thing that I want to do that's of interest, and I'm conflicted with it because I don't want to be working with imports. I like the idea of having a captive bred collection. On the same time, writing the book, that genus Erythrolamprus, those little guys that are so much fun. I wouldn't mind establishing one of those, but they're of all the freaking imported snakes to choose to establish, let's try to establish something whose entire diet is frogs. Like you can't ask for a more parasite laden animal than those guys. But that's really it for me. I'm happy as a lark with all this kind of neat transformation I did over the past year back to North American colubrids, with the South American guys, and then my rando rear fangs. I'm pretty happy. I don't feel need, and I think it's important to say when you're asked like what's the next animal, it can totally be not necessarily new additions to your collection, but it could actually be like, well, I'm going to try to breed these things I have and get more of, like what you said, Matt, establish what I already have. Like that's still additions to the collection. The overall end of the snake population in your collection's going up. And one of the great things for me, I never thought that I would be breeding anything in like dispersing false water cobras across the United States like Johnny Appleseed. I didn't think I'd be doing that. But it's kind of fun. It's great because it's neat. I know you get this all the time, Matt, to have somebody a year later, 2 years later, send you a picture of the snake and the setup. And the really cool thing about false waters is at least the community that's on social media, that's definitely a snake where big, spacious, naturalistic enclosures are what's being pushed. Like that's the standard. And I love seeing people who have like just one pet falsie and they got like a freaking half the room decked out. That's pretty awesome. So that's yeah. Speaking of that, how are yours doing, Josh?
Yeah.
Mine are good. They're awesome. I love them.
Excellent.
Yeah, I have the one from you, and then I have some lavenders. I know how you feel about the genetics with those, but yeah, I like them. I think they're very cool. And I feel like they're kind of, for the size animal that they are, and like you said, for the enclosure and everything that they require, they're very popular, and I've only seen them, I feel like after year, they're just becoming more and more popular.
Yep. No, they're the dog of the snake world. And they're kind of cool. I'm partial to them anyway, but no, that's great. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. And then, just to touch back with,
Well, I mean,
no, I was just going to say,
go ahead. No.
Like we were talking about, like you said, with the new additions with breeding and stuff, I'm kind of curious, to see what certain projects are bringing out now that, a lot of stuff that we've been working with is starting to really have generations now. Like me and Matt have been talking with the mandarins. We're starting to see a lot of funky stuff going on with them. And I'm kind of curious to see what the next couple of years are going to bring. I only think they could get better.
Very cool.
Yeah, Joshua was lucky enough to pick up some multi-het mandarins from me. A lot of stuff, typically, if I know someone's genuinely interested in something and I have good working relations with them, I typically offer those people directly those opportunities. And just recently, I go to Josh, I go, so how are those things looking? And he goes, they're not normal.
Yeah, they're definitely unique. It's awesome.
Cool.
So, yeah. And that's like the hard part when working with some of this stuff with multi-het animals and things like that is just, you just never know how animals are actually going to turn out. Because there's a lot of surprises along the way, too, as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. So I have one last question, which I've been wondering the entire episode, and it's not on our outline, Matt. It's like it's an outlier, but it's I think it's something that's cool. So the people listening can't see it, but Josh, Matt, and I can see each other. And so if you see these enclosures right here, those are my crested geckos because I got into cresteds. That's what I chose to be the thing to bring me back in. And you said that you were breeding cresteds. And I'm just curious, crested keeping, this is a fun question. Snake keeping. You can't get two different animals as far as their care is concerned because one needs like every 2 to 3 days you're doing something, and then the others, I'm not saying that you like abandon your snakes, but the snakes, it's like pull the tub, look in the enclosure, check for poo, water, you're done. What's it like having a collection with all these crazy snakes and all these cresteds? Are you like heading towards snakes because they're different, or are the cresteds just entrenched? And just talk a little bit about what it is to keep two very different foci of herpetoculture under one roof.
It definitely keeps me on my toes. Like you said, the cresteds, they require a lot. If feeding every 2 to 3 days, and the whole collection, I think my collection probably sits around 250 now, and it's only growing by the day. Yeah,
That
they
is a
have their
lot
own.
of geckos.
They have their own rooms. It's not that I am switching over to the snakes. It kind of was the crescents of the bread and butter. Once I started kind of
Yep.
recouping some of my investment with that, then I started to, splurge into the snakes because that's kind of really what got me into this industry
total
to
sense.
begin with. But yeah, I mean, the crescents are fun. As a great first time, pet, they're very, I feel like, besides for feeding, it's low maintenance. They don't require crazy heat. We could have a whole debate with the UVB and stuff, but I feel like that,
Yeah.
for a first time keeper, they're definitely a good, starter reptile.
Yeah,
They're like the Asian rat snake of the lizard community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, except for I can't breed Asian rat snakes. I can breed crested geckos. I will never forget the first time I put a male crested in with a female, and I thought, okay, the mating, it's going to take like an hour or two. It took less than 30 seconds. As soon as he realized that was a female, the clicking and then the biting and then the mating, and I was like, holy hell, this is fast. So, no, we actually use them. We're talking about using them at West Liberty because all my progeny went to West Liberty as an example animal to show like stud books and breeding programs because we can probably get off a generation of eggs from like mating, egg laying babies in a semester. But no, we have quite a few of them at the school. But yeah, I respect the racodactylid keepers that are doing snakes too. So kudos to you. Plus, I wanted you to be able to plug your cresteds while on the podcast.
Thank you.
Josh got some cool cresteds too. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like we were saying, I work
All
with
right.
pretty much everything.
So we're nearing the end here. Any final comments, concerns, anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to put out into the universe?
I mean, that's on you guys. I think, I'm good with everything. I feel like I answered a lot of the stuff, But yeah, I'm just excited to see what happens this year.
Excellent. So if people want to find you, what's the best way for them to reach out and make contact with you?
I have Facebook. It's Jersey Exotic Reptile Keepers or Jerk. There, Instagram. I'm kind of bad with posting, but I'll always answer messages. Yeah, that's really the best way.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Josh. This has been a fun one.
Guys, thank you. It was a
And
pleasure.
we'll have to have you on in a year or two when you're producing lavenders and file snakes and Vietnamese mandarins and all these things that us colubrid breeders drool over.
Right.
If people want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Dr. Crawdad there, and then Facebook. It's just Zach Loafman. And I, like I said before, a little bit older in the fact that I use Messenger from Facebook a little bit more than Instagram, but I use them both. And my lab, the way I communicate with my students is through Facebook Messenger. So I'm checking Messenger once an hour while I'm awake. So if you want to get a hold of me, that's definitely the best way. And Matt, people want to reach out to you. How can they find you?
you can find me on Sarpamitra on Facebook and Sarpamitra USA on Instagram. And I apologize for delay in responses, but it's been nutty.
Yes.
So
another thing before we wrap it up, because we haven't done this in the past couple episodes, but Matt and I are insanely appreciative to the Morelia Python Network for hosting our show. We're proud to be a part of that network, and we have a lot of things planned for the future. And Josh, thanks for coming on. We will definitely be having you on in the future should you want to come back. And
Definitely.
with
Thank you.
that, I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode. If you want to reach out to us, you know how to do it. So with that, have a wonderful day, night, evening, morning, whatever it is when you're listening to this. See ya.